If religion cannot solve a problem, it should at least reduce the problem, but it should not compound the problem.
This season of the Unamplified podcast is sponsored by the GIZ African Union Aware Project. A project aims to strengthen women's representation and participation in political processes.
Religion is a powerful force. It influences how we interact. It influences our societal behaviors. It also influences political ideology. In fact, in a lot of African society, even as society evolves, religion still serves as a moral guardrail informing our identity, informing our interaction. But the bigger question is, how do we leverage religion to promote a more inclusive and representative society? My name is Cynthia Mbamalu. Welcome to another episode of the Unamplified podcast. And with me, as always, I have my co-host.
Hi, everyone. My name is Queen CY, and welcome to the Unamplified podcast.
Yes, we'll be discussing religion and representation. And we have two powerful guests, experts in the field, to discuss this topic with us today. Queen CY, over to you.
We are honored to welcome our distinguished guest, Reverend Father Atta Bakindo. He's a Catholic priest. He's a peace builder, an educator, and also he's an executive director for the Fredcoker Center in Abuja. Also with us here, we have Sheikh Mohammed Nuruddin Lemu. He's an Islamic scholar, a peace advocate, who is known for his contribution in interfaith dialogue and social justice. Welcome to the Unamplified podcast.
Thank you so much. As you're introducing, I was just smiling.
Yes, I'm so happy to have Sheikh Lemu also. It's a pleasure to have you on this episode.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And Father?
I'm really honored and I'm happy to be here.
Yes. You know, Father and I had a debate around this. It was in February. We're talking about women and representation and religion. And when we were thinking around curating this topic, I told myself, no, I have to pull in Father Atta and then I have to reach out to Sheikh Lemu because we need experts to discuss that. And that's because increasingly we're seeing religion playing an important role, especially within African society. Religion is still very relevant in how it informs our social interaction. It also informs even personal identities. And we do believe it's important in safeguarding certain things that we believe are important social norms. But as we look into the political space, we're increasingly seeing religion also leveraged as a tool to close out the space for young women, for young people, for women, and sometimes even for persons with disabilities and participation in the political space. So I'll begin with a general question for this, and maybe I'll start with Father Atta in the studio. As a Catholic priest, what's the position of the Christian faith when it comes to women political leadership and women representation?
I think for me, let us first of all put this whole conversation into a bit of historical perspective, particularly with your introduction saying that religion influences. I don't think the role of religion remains just at the level of influence. The religion has been educating, really giving people moral direction. Remember the whole of Africa where maybe Islam didn't come, Christianity didn't come. There was massive aggressive forms of paganism, which was very, very marginalizing and very exclusionary for a lot of women, even just the pagan system. And you can imagine how much Islam and even Christianity fought so hard to unchain people from pagan beliefs and what happens to women. For example, if you go to my village, just Google a place called Koma. That it was discovered in 1986 then by Colonel Madaki, who was governor of Gongola State. If you go to Koma or you go to Jangani Mountains, even up to today, you don't find any form of Western education also. It's the churches and Islam that is still struggling with traditional beliefs to set people actually free. So if you go to that place, for example, and you find women having no two incisors, the two big teeth are being removed, it's because they are widows. So the moment your husband dies, traditionally they force out the two tooth, and it's happening up to today. Just Google on your phone, Koma people. They don't wear clothes, they wear leaves. Nobody goes there, not even the government. It is Islam, imams and Catholic priests who try to bring education and really healthcare to men, to women, to girls, and to children. So it's not just about influencing, it's also about really, really educating. And so when I come to your question, historically we have been doing that. We continue to do that. I think for me, the question is whether you want religion or the church or Islam to pay money and determine if women and girls should hold political office, or to simply give them the education that they require and then take advantage of the opportunities that are available. And I think for us in Christianity, we are not going to sponsor you. We don't have that money. I don't know if there are churches willing to sponsor. We had rumors that even some bandits are beginning to sponsor politicians. We don't know how true that is. But I think that in terms of education, we want to provide that education to create the knowledge, to create the awareness for people to understand political systems, electoral processes, and then take advantage of how they want to really now participate in that. So that will be my short answer to that for the moment.
How people to create awareness and education. I'll come back to that, and because also look at how the role the church can do in creating a sense of equitable participation. And I'll move to Sheikh Lemu. So you're a prominent Islamic scholar, and I follow a lot of your work. And from your perspective, what's Islam's position when it comes to women political leadership and women representation generally?
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Briefly, and just to go straight to the point with your answer, there are, when we say religion, so let's take whether Islam or Christianity, but let me speak on behalf of Islam. We are talking about a community of faithful that span centuries and millennia. So when we say what is the opinion, opinions change with contexts. So there's definitely no one answer to that question. If you say, what is the opinion of Muslim religious leaders across time or across geography? Number one. Number two, it'll be similar to what is the medicine for malaria. You would find diversity across time, across geography.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's important we realize that, number one, there's a diversity of views among Muslim religious scholars, because some of them are very patriarchal, and that's the context they grew up in. Some are more respectful of women because they grew up there, and some have studied and seen good role models of both men and women that allow them to have a more egalitarian understanding of the religion and its interpretation in various contexts. So let me start by saying, when it comes to, so let's start with the top office, head of state, president, prime minister, that type of position, there are various views among Muslim scholars. So you will find on one extreme, there's the opinion that a woman cannot be head of state. In fact, can't be leader in any capacity. I disagree with that vehemently, but we're not here to discuss my personal opinions. We can touch that too. But you've got those who, a woman should not even appear on television. A woman should not be heard in public. You've got that type of extreme. Then you've got those who will say, well, it depends, depends on the level of leadership, depends on if there's a better person available, they would prefer a man. Then you have those who would say, well, the interpretation of the text was never for a democratic context where you have all these checks and balances in society for leaders. And so you would find those who would say that, for example, the chairman of the Fatwa Council, that is the Religious Verdict Council of the Nigerian Supreme Council of Islamic Affairs, Sheikh Sharif Saleh, along with many other scholars, he concludes a woman can be a head of state in Nigeria or in any democratic society. And then there are those Muslim scholars who have no problem a woman leading prayers for men, not just women. Imam Tabari, Imam Abu Thawr, classical scholars, and those who believe that a woman can be a leader in any capacity once she has the character and the competence. So you have this diverse spectrum of opinion. So when it comes, however, to Nigeria, somebody like Sheikh Sharif Saleh is one of the most distinguished scholars of Islamic legal theory when it comes to interpreting text in various contexts. You will still find in Nigeria some who will disagree with him on this matter, but with all due respect, I would say very few would be close to his level of scholarship who would want to disagree with him. So there is a disagreement. And as Father Barkindo mentioned, the traditional role of society has been, you know, anytime you go into history and you want to say who is talking ethics, who is saying be forgiving, who is trying to moderate leadership, the traditional civil society organizations, if we use that modern terminology, that acted as a balance of power from the kings, etc., has always been the religious structure, religious establishment. And I think they still have a role to direct, to educate, to influence the values, because this is critical. When we talk about representation, we want greater justice, we want greater stewardship, we definitely want shura. And I'll end on this last point. The Quran emphasizes what is called shura. Shura means consultation. In a number of verses, God requires people to consult others in their matters or in matters that affect them. And, you know, companions of the Prophet would say they never came across somebody that was as consultative as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when it came to community issues, including consulting women. Every Muslim scholar, you only need an ignorant person to say the Prophet did not consult his wife, Salama, on a major political issue where there was potential conflict. So his wife, Aisha, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, was a major general in the Battle of the Camel against, it wasn't really against the Caliph, but we can look into the details of history. So there is a diversity of views, but we should always move towards what is more just, what is more equitable, what shows greater compassion. The best of you are those who are most useful, and that's what we all want to be, most useful to our communities, irrespective of our gender, ethnicity, religion, culture, age, etc.
Wow, thank you so much, because I loved how you also concluded on your points, because the idea is at the end, we're looking for what is more just, what is more equitable, and what serves us the most as a society. And I think it also connects with what Father Atta talked about, the need to constantly educate and create awareness, which is also an important role that religion plays out. Quincy, why?
So, Father, religion has been used to justify exclusion, especially for women. And there's something you said that in your place, that when a woman's husband dies, they remove their teeth. Now, in that kind of place that they remove your teeth, how can a woman even bring out her head to want to contest for leadership roles? Now, the question is, as a Christian scholar, how can Christian scholars counter misrepresentation in such kind of places?
I think you and me have the opportunity to sit here and talk because we are born in this generation, right? Imagine we were born in 330 AD, for example. Our thinking would completely have been different. And the reason is that for those women, they are born in that context, educated and grew up in that context. There are some of people from my village, I bring them here to Abuja to live and get a job. After 1 month, they move back because they can't even, the prices of things, they can't cope with it. One of them told me I'll get him a flight ticket to go back to Yola. He came by road, he paid 20,000. But going back to Yola from here, the central area to the airport was 25K. He couldn't understand. How could he come from Yola to Abuja? He paid 20,000. But then to get to central area to the airport, he's paying 25. So as the Sheikh mentioned, it's really, really the issue of context. And for us, it's just education and knowledge. And I understand why you're asking me as a Catholic priest this question. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you look at the structure of the Vatican.
Yes,
priests can only be men, really, not women, for now. I know you want those reforms to be done. It's the matter of time.
I'm a Catholic too.
Priests, we right now are not allowed to marry if you want to become priest. But that doesn't mean that before now, priests were not marrying. It's not a defined law. It's an administrative law that can change really anytime. So I understand. But within the same structure, you have women who are very, very influential, in charge of either the Vatican Bank. They are in charge of, let us say, superior generals of different congregations. They are in charge of different dicasteries of the Catholic Church at very influential level. But ultimately with this argument, for us, we are trying to promote situations where people's potentials can be brought out very clearly. And therefore, they deploy those potentials to support issues of justice, to support issues of equity, promote education, promote human rights, promote human dignity, irrespective of whether you are holding a particular office or not. If you have a woman who can help hold politicians accountable through religious training, I think for us, this is really, really enough. A lot of reforms really have happened, and a lot of reforms need to happen. But I think fundamentally, we have to provide some bit of a moral compass to guide humanity. There are certain essential elements of the human being that, in my opinion, is my opinion, not that of the church, that I think that needs to be maintained. For example, I can never pretend to be a woman for whatever reason. And I respect those who have different opinions with me. And I think as a religion, we need to guard those very fundamentals of what it means to be a human person and the reason why God created us and put us here and shape our physical features quite completely, different. So we hope that those reforms will happen, both for the growth of humanity, but also for the growth of justice, of equity, of human rights and all that. But let us always never forget the fundamentals of what it means to be human, whether you're a man or you're a woman. And I think our role should be in, making sure that there's equity and justice.
Okay, Father, before I come to Sheikh, because there's something you said that also drew my attention to how a lot of times, because I go to church, and there are sometimes there are certain preachings that I do believe is a misinterpretation of the scripture that is used to promote patriarchal ideology. Because, we are a society that we have traditional beliefs and religion. And it seems that sometimes we also interpret our traditions or rather our religion from our perspective of tradition.
Let me cut you there.
So let me just land on this question, Father. We had this debate in February. And
because don't forget how much humanity has changed and how much civilization is changing.
But how can we begin to interpret our religion in a way that it's not basically about the patriarchal ideas we have, but about an inclusive and equitable society, especially when it comes to women political leadership? Because now it's about leadership in the political space, not even in the church.
I think women political leadership is really like the Nigerian context. And it's the Nigerian context that I know so well. I don't know how you as a woman, you can contest to be a local government chairperson if you don't really have the money in the first place. This is what the laws and everything have actually conditioned us to. Because at the end of the day, even if you get the expression of interest form and they give you the form for free, when it comes to the actual politicking as a woman, you must have your own personal money, because the party may not actually give you money to go and sponsor that. You have to attend the night meetings. This thing has nothing to do with religion. It's your own capacity as a woman to actually go out and do it. And I think we must understand that one really in that context. We, for example, right now at the Cooker Center, we are working with political parties. If you look at the rules, the regulations, the processes, everything is tailored in such a way that if you are a young person, you are a woman, you don't have the money, you can't meet the criteria, the context and the conditions, it's going to be extremely difficult. Religion can only give you the moral guide, but you have to infiltrate the context and the situation. Religion may actually tell you, don't take bribe. Religion will tell you, respect the law. Religion will tell you, do not sin, do not commit adultery, do not go after people's husband. Yet the political context doesn't say anything about. In fact, it attracts you to those conditions. So you have to be extremely above the board in order to succeed even as a woman. So the question then is, how can religious leaders and religious institutions really work with the politicians and the political system? But unfortunately, don't forget, these politicians are either Christians, Catholics, or they are also, Muslims, Sunni, Shia. They go to the mosques on Fridays, they go to the church on Sundays, they listen to the same homilies. We are begging and pleading, be kind, forgive, don't take bribe. When they get out, they have to face also the economic reality.
Okay, I'll bring Sheikh Lemu, because now, I get it. The politicians, we always say that all our leaders in Nigeria belong to one faith or the other. They are either Christians or Muslims, but yet our political system is still dealing with the challenges it's dealing with. And I want to bring in Sheikh Lemu here, and that's because, like I said, I listen to your work a lot, and during the COVID-19 pandemic, the lockdown period, there were this series you were running on YouTube. I really enjoyed them because you also brought in things around even family, the role of a father and a mother, and the fact that building successful families is dependent on how fathers, mothers work together. It's not a one person or one partner role. And so I want to get your perspective, because I know you're also from the northern part of the country. We have a major struggle when it comes to women representation in some states in the north, not all states. I know in some states, like in the northwestern states, only Kaduna currently has a woman in the state assembly. All the others are male dominated. And so how do we promote religion as an important moral guardrail to promote the values we hold dear, but also ensure that it does not become a justification to shutting the door to women who actually contest in the election? Because we have women contesting. The problem is in some of these states, they are not going far. And a lot of times religion is used as something to shut the door to them.
Absolutely. Religion, as Father Berkindo mentioned, you mentioned in your opening remarks, is a major mobilizer of human beings. It has sent people to corners of the world you just will not believe, just in order to serve others and to improve things. So it's a very powerful tool. And so for some people, it's a tool also for getting what they want, not so much service, more self-service, if I use that term. I think there's a problem we sometimes have when it comes to our relationship with religious leaders. We seem to generally all have no problem with appreciating the need for teaching people mathematics. And we need good math teachers because we need good engineers.
Yes.
And we need good engineers because whether it's civil engineers and roads or dams and all of this, or whether we want good doctors, we want good pharmacists, we want good everything. Because we appreciate very clearly why those professions and areas are important to society. When it comes to religion, however, the government and most of us seem not to care about our best and brightest moving into religion, studying it. In some places, I'm not generalizing, but just in some places, if you go to the religious department in some universities, you go to study religion because you didn't qualify for anything else. And so, and so, number one, a lot of our religious leaders, they have a lot of clout. They are local celebrities. They have a lot of followers, but very many of them are jack of all trades, masters of nothing. You do have those who they go to university, they've qualified, they've done their PhDs, they are respected in their fields, but then everybody thinks you can ask any question to a religious scholar without asking, did he specialize in Islamic finance or marital law?
True.
Or Islamic political thought or jurisprudence, or so unfortunately, what we also have is a lot of religious illiteracy among the masses, meeting with a lot of incompetent people speaking on behalf of religion. We don't care about standards. We care whether you have a standard before you become a barrister. We care about your standards before you become a doctor. But unfortunately, when it comes to the area of religion, it is very unregulated. It is underfunded. The best and brightest aren't there. But yet, when we realize Boko Haram is on the rise, when we realize some problem is on the rise in the name of religion, we are stuck when it comes to where are the competent people to solve this problem. It is when it comes close to politics, then you find governors wanting to pay Hajj tickets and pilgrimage tickets to religious leaders to woo them to their side, to try and use religious instruments as campaigning instruments, as if we have not seen, as Father Barkindo mentioned, corrupt Muslim leadership, corrupt Christian leadership. And you keep talking, and it's not, I think, there's a lot to be done, but one big problem is we have not gotten enough, nor have we cared to groom competence when it comes to some of our religious leaders. And so when a topic comes where we need people, it's really difficult to find people who have studied the subject area. We become like people, villagers going to the hospital and he's taking his pregnancy to the dentist. Why? Well, they say you're also a doctor. Like we don't know who to go to. You have a beard, you have a turban, you've got a collar. Yeah, so we definitely have that crisis of authority, and we have serious competence problems. Many people, instead of who is the most competent scholar in this subject, it's who's the most popular globally, and that's the person I'm going to ask regarding a local problem. So definitely a lot of challenges. Patriarchy of culture has definitely seeped into a lot of religious thinking, and it has created a confirmation bias. Cultures have generally by default been patriarchal throughout history. There have been very few exceptions. But as we see changes, more women getting educated, education is a big equalizer between royalty and laity. And I think we are seeing women coming just as competent as men in areas, just as we find men now. In the past, there was no such thing as a midwife or the job of midwife being done by a man. True. It was impossible. You can hear of fishermen, but not fisherwomen. You'll hear of hunters, but so there are those cultural roles. But now that you've got agriculture, anybody can be the farmer, anybody can get the food. It's the machines, anybody can be a soldier, not just men, because the amount of strength required to pull a trigger, it's not one where biceps really matter too much. So I'm not saying we don't have areas that men do better generally than women, but what we are finding is those clear demarcations are becoming less and less noticeable.
Can I just say something? Really, I've never had anyone put this thing so eloquently and beautifully like they share. Because in addition to this level of incompetence you spoke about among the religious leaders and the crisis, of leadership, there's also another issue of very weak accountability institutions within this country. In addition to that, people now expect religion to take on those roles that they have failed to play. Yeah. So, for example, in the courts, among the police, among the soldiers, there are also Christians and Muslims. Sure. So if they heard about moral preaching in church and mosques, when they go back to their places of worship, we expect them to be fair. We expect them to comply with the law. But when they don't, you are now running back to the same religious leadership and institutions that have crisis of authority, bedeviled with incompetence and all that. So it's just a melting pot, literally, of everything. So I don't expect that a religious leader or an institution should step in to do the duty of another institution that has been empowered by law and the constitution to do their own work. Religion should provide the moral guide, and you should continue with the judicial process and the law that you are expected to implement and to enforce. I don't think if a policeman fails in his duty, do you expect a priest or a sheikh to come and take on that role? You understand me?
Yes.
So it's the extent to which you are religious, you are a Catholic, you are a Christian. After getting out of the church, how do they comply with the law? And I think for me, this is where the crisis is. how do we bring in the moral values that we learn from religion to impact on our own public service and public engagement?
Wow, that's an important, how do we bring, because I think this is also the bigger question. And when we talk about how every religion teaches about love, about respect, about human dignity, but it has not stopped the level of gender-based violence or the increase in violence against women and girls, or even the level of violation of fundamental human rights. We have minors that are locked up for things they did not even do. We have citizens that the funds meant for the people is siphoned by one person, and that person will go for Thanksgiving on Sunday in church after siphoning the funds meant for a population. And so at the end, it's also about, because I think every religion, the values we hold dear is promoted by the religions we subscribe to. But the thing is, in our daily lives, how are we imbibing those values to even how we interact with each other? Quincy, I had the question for Father.
Father, you've been involved in interfaith dialogue and peace building. How important is interfaith collaboration in ensuring fair women representation in diverse African societies?
I think it's really very important, and the importance is linked to, first of all, women themselves understanding who they are, what their role is in society. One of the experiences we encounter is that it is women who actually oppose women when we are trying to promote. I remember we had some conference in Yola, and where we invited Islamic women, Christian women, and some of the men. And some of the women insisted they would sit at the back. We told them, no, just come to the front. And as they were coming, another woman like, this woman has no respect. How can she go and sit in the front? It's just literally like sitting arrangement. But when it comes to the level of peace building, I think for me, the women are very, very influential. And the initial training given by the women is absolutely important. And we look at some of the conflicts. A lot of the men have been killed. The women have just taken on roles that initially we thought they would never do. They have become breadwinners and they have become all that. But when it comes to the entire process of peace building in Nigeria generally, and whether women should play a role or not, I think it's becoming very frustrating, in my opinion. So, for example, it's not as if you go to Washington, violence is not happening. There's gun violence. So even the violence happening in central London, in Madrid, in Washington, in New York, compared to what is happening in Nigeria. But for them, it's a crime. And a judicial process must follow. For us, it's peace building. Let's forgive. Let's move on. And that forgiveness sometimes is so perpetrator-centric to a point that the victims are in IDP camps, excluded, not taken care of. For example, every Sunday I go to one little church around after massacre. They call the place St. Mark Godape. So now I go with a truck full of Indomie and water, because a lot of the people in that church are IDPs from Kaduna, from Benue, as far as southern Borno. They have run away, and I don't want to enter the church and just preach, love each other, forgive, and then drive my car, leave them in the same social and economic condition.
Yeah.
You understand? And at the end, it is the women that will suffer. And then number two, most of the opinions and the ideas the women bring forth are not articulated in such a way that they become part of public policy making. They are not really ingrained into the decision-making process. And I think this is the sad thing about Nigeria. When we did a survey asking normal, ordinary people, when you feel unsafe and threatened in terms of insecurity, who is the first person you are going to go to? The survey revealed that they go to either a traditional ruler or a religious leader. And most of the women actually do that. But when the government is developing their DDRR program and their response strategy, religious leaders and traditional rulers are even the least to be considered. So the expectation of the government and how to respond to the crisis is completely different from the expectation of those on ground who are the victims and who are actually suffering, what is going on. So it's a bit like the Sheikh mentioned, complete lack of shura, lack of consultation, lack of engagement, so that the opinions of those on ground, particularly the opinions of women and girls, really become part of the decision-making process and the policy. And for me, these are some of the challenges, but ultimately, the women have a lot to offer in terms of opinion and even agents of change and participation.
Yeah, well, thanks. Because when you talked about, now one thing I'm learning from this podcast, the concept of shura, I'm going to be using it. The importance of consultation, because I think honestly, that's the truth. When we talk about governance, a responsive leadership system is one that is constantly talking and engaging the people, and their perspective is informing the policy decisions. And a lot of times when you gave the instance of peace building, women are on the ground. Lots of them play, would I call it a reviewed leadership role because of the crisis they found themselves in. But they profess solutions, but this is not integrated into policy decisions. And that is also a leadership gap, because we need to have the voices of those living those realities inform the response strategy of the government. And I want to bring in Sheikh, and this will be because we're trying to round up this conversation. Well, I'll start with the Sheikh and I'll come with Father Atta, because it's going to be a general question. If our religion promotes the idea that men and women are created equal in rights and dignity, why is it increasingly becoming difficult when you have a conversation around gender equality and people tell you in our religion there can't be equality of sex? And I'll give an example. I had a debate. I had the father. This is not for you. This was Sheikh. I'll come back to you. I had an engagement with young people in Sokoto, under 30-year-olds, and we're talking around community organizing, policy advocacy for social change. And one topic was the concept of human rights and what rights young people are entitled to. Then I mentioned young men, young women, and then young person with disability. And I had some of the young men basically say, oh, women don't have rights, they have privileges. What we give to them is privileges. You're first under your father or your brother or your husband. And it took us a long session to debate on the concept of human rights. And before they agreed that, okay, maybe their sisters also have the same rights that they do. But they were also pushing for youth inclusion, because they kept saying the government doesn't take young people into account. So I'm like, oh, you're advocating for your voice to be heard by government. Why shouldn't your sister's voice be heard equally by government? And so for me, I wanted to get from your perspective, how do we begin to change the conversation that gender equality is not a political statement, it's just a basis around human right, that we're all human in rights and dignity?
I think one problem is within the Muslim community in particular, something that's become very popular has been what you'd call a reactionary kind of jurisprudence, a reactionary type of thinking. That the moment something comes from the West, then it is un-Islamic by default. Instead of looking at, wait a minute, is this Islamically okay from the Quran and the Sunnah? So what we have is the West is Christian, the Middle East is Muslim. These are the stereotypes. And if Christians are now coming with feminism, that's Christian, or it is secular. Therefore, it is anti-Islamic. Instead of stopping to look at what's the substance, leave the terminology. Is somebody admitting that we need justice? Men do not have a right to greater justice than women. As human beings, we are equal in our humanity. We are equal as spirits created by God. We are equal in our purpose. We are equal in our worth. We are equal in our dignity. And we are equal in our rights as human beings. But regarding our worth and value, and that's why I think the need to distinguish between the question of our roles in society and how those roles give us certain privileges. If you are a president, you have certain privileges. If you are a father, a mother, every role comes with certain responsibilities, with privileges, with rights, and all of that. So I think the need to separate the intrinsic equality of men and women, in Christian language, as children of God, or servants of God, as we would want to put it, but I think we generally mean the same thing. So that's, I think, important to separate. Otherwise, some people think you are saying men are the same as women. And then somebody will say, but what about biology? But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the worth and the dignity of the human being. When it comes to superiority, you do have some men who believe in every religion that men are superior to women. But you would also find those who would go the other way around, unfortunately, instead of just being spiritually humble and saying, God knows who is closer to him than me. The Quran is very clear. He has created us into nations, tribes, men, women, but the greatest among you, the most honorable to God, is the most God conscious. It's not the one who has one type of biology over the other. So I feel when it comes to how we communicate, the language we use, the preparation of the ground to get certain concepts clear. So you would have this discussion with people, and finally they begin to realize, okay, if you were to kill a woman, or you ask any Muslim, if you kill a woman or you kill a man, is the punishment different? No. If you steal from a man or steal from a woman, it's the same. If you slap a man or slap a woman, it's the same. In other words, if a man backbites or a woman backbites, it's the same sin. If a man prays or refuses to fast or does this, it's the same. So I would say sometimes it is how we bring the topic. Some people are quick to conclude, this is feminism, and they get reactionary. Whereas I think if you get people who know what they are presenting, it's easier to present. I will conclude with a statement by a medieval scholar, Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, where he said, the entirety of Sharia, the Islamic way of life, he says, is about bringing benefit to humans in this world and in the hereafter. Every ruling of Sharia is about justice, wisdom, mercy, and goodness. And any policy, any ruling that goes contrary to justice, contrary to mercy, contrary to benefit and goodness is a policy that does not belong to Sharia, even if people want to claim it is according to their interpretation. So I think if religion cannot solve a problem, it should at least reduce the problem, but it should not compound the problem.
Yes, if it cannot solve it, it shouldn't compound the problem. And I'll ask the same question to Father, but maybe to add, and I also want to get the Sheikh's perspective on this. Are there stories of women in our holy books that we can use to showcase the important role women play in society? That's an aside question. But Father, I mean, the whole idea of we're created equal in dignity and rights. What would be the response to anyone listening who still believes that women cannot have equality of rights as men do?
My tribe is Chamba. Nobody knows about Chamba people in this country.
Now I know.
The only distinction we make is not between human beings. It's between human beings and animals. And it's in the concept of death.
Okay.
When an animal dies, we use the word death, and it's translated equally in English, in Hausa, and my language. But when a human person dies, we don't have a verb to die as related to a human being. The verb we use is the person is missing. Okay. And it doesn't matter whether it's a man, a woman, a boy, or a girl. We are all equal in dignity, equal in honor, equal in creation. That's even from the traditional point of view. If you look at the recent Pope, that was Pope Leo, he took the name Leo XIV, but he took that name from Leo XIII. And Leo XIII became Pope at the inception of the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
And he wrote the encyclical called Rerum Novarum, which means the dignity of human labor. And the central point in this encyclical is that there's too much emphasis on human rights with neglecting human responsibilities. That you can't have right, you can't claim right by neglecting your responsibility to society, to your family, and to everyone. The only thing that gives you moral authority to your right is the responsibilities you are able to execute towards the society, towards humanity. And I think for me, that's the concept of human rights. We constantly, for decades, UN status, African Union, ECOWAS, all these regional body, human rights, to a point that this generation has inculcated and this sentimental attachment to your right. You have forgotten what your responsibility is to your family and to your society. And I think for me, this is the main thing. So if you talk about human right, equal right between a man and a woman, what about our responsibilities? Are we able to fulfill that? And for me, we must carry the two absolutely together. And that is what we teach in Christianity and even in the church. It's true that we should have equal right. But if you keep on emphasizing on your right to be this, your right to be that, what about your own responsibility? Because you are not created for yourself alone. You're created to serve humanity. And if you forget that, you keep emphasizing your individual right, that somehow is greed, in my opinion. Because you can't live for, and that's why they say no man or no woman is an island. We live for the service of others. They call it Ubuntu, right?
Yeah.
I am because
you are.
Exactly. So that's my point.
Okay, and now I'll bring in Quincy. I want to hear from Sheikh. Are there stories from our holy book that we can leverage to support women leadership, women candidacy? Because a lot of us go into communities to engage, and we're also working with the legislative arm of government to push for legislation for affirmative action for women representation in parliament through the reserved seats bill. So are there stories that we can leverage in our work from the holy book? And I'll start with Sheikh, then I'll come to Father, and then Quincy. Why?
Simple answer, yes. The challenge you have with some, however, is just how they would want to interpret and restrict. So there's always somebody who would want to clip the wings of women. The Quran actually praises Bilqis, that's the Queen of Sheba, who eventually got married to Sulaiman. And in fact, one great scholar, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, another great scholar, Muhammad Ghazali, said, it is interesting that what the Quran praised when it discussed Bilqis was her consultative, reconciliatory form of leadership. In the hadith and early prophetic history, as I've mentioned, we had Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, one of the greatest narrators of hadith. We have known, we have over 2,000 narrations, authentic narrations about Prophet Muhammad from his wife Aisha. So nobody will tell you she doesn't know Islam. In fact, there's a common statement attributed to the Prophet by a gentleman who said that the Prophet Muhammad said a nation that is led by a woman will not succeed. But he said it to Aisha, but Aisha's understanding of that statement did not prevent her from heading the battle of the camel as the general. And you can't get a more macho role than that. So here, of course, closer to home, you will have your Queen Amina of Zaria. I think we've all heard about her. Hajia Nana Asma'u, who inspired what today we call Form 1. I would end with saying, just as this is my last pitch, put it that way. You know, when the Quran, and this is for, you know, as you move into promoting more women's participation in politics, and I think it's very important, it's very useful that we have more women in leadership positions, just as we have more women in everyday life. Because if you don't have women, men would usually be oblivious to some of the needs and challenges that women are. I mean, tractors and all the technology first helped men outside before it came to grinding machines and microwaves to help some of the women inside. So, yeah. So when you do need women representing us all, not women representing women, women representing us all. We need men representing us all. We need men and women cooperating in doing good. So it's not a competition, but unfortunately some like to make it a competition, and our job is to have greater fairness, greater equity, greater justice in ensuring we all care about the rights of men and women as servants of God and people who we all have to work together. And we can't be fighting. We've got enough fights on different fronts.
Yes, thank you so much, Sheikh. We can't be fighting. Father, before
we are very, very similar to what the Sheikh are saying, you know, mentioning Queen Sheba, who was also like a ruler and came and making Solomon. But if you look at the life of Jesus, Mary even accepting to be the mother of Isa, the mother of Jesus. At that time, you can imagine Mary claiming that she's pregnant with the gift of the Holy Spirit, not knowing a man. If your friend is pregnant, she tells you the Holy Spirit today, or that I paid money on this girl, I paid my dowry, everything, and then she's pregnant. And I asked her, she says the Holy Spirit. A Nigerian man will take that Holy Spirit to court, for example. You understand? So Mary even having that courage to leave that time and to accept the will of God to pass through. If you look at all the women that surrounded Jesus, for example, all the men denied Jesus.
True.
Peter denied Jesus. Judas sold him. Others ran away. Do you understand? But the women were there, even following through the stations of the cross. Veronica was there to wipe his face. The women were at the foot of the cross. And even when Jesus was killed, all the apostles literally disappeared. It was the women that woke up in the morning, went to the tomb, and started spreading the news when actually they themselves were in hiding. Even when Jesus ascended and the other apostles started their work, people like Paul, like Peter, Stephen was stoned to death. It's women like Tabitha and Damaris that provided accommodation for Paul. So for me, these examples and role models litter the Quran al-Karim and litter the Bible. My only worry is that today, our modern girls who are Christians and Muslims, are they really willing to read and understand these role models and actually imitate them to take up these leadership roles in the present society? We have those role models littered in the Quran, littered in the Bible. We are now looking for people that will take the steps and to follow into those models.
Okay, Quincy, why?
Well, just like Father has said, that the Bible has shown us that women were not seen as inferior to men. We can see in the book of Judges chapter 4 and 5, Deborah, Prophet Deborah, how she led the Israelites to defeat the Canaanites from king. So we could see that women were always there at the forefront in military, and also Queen Esther, how she saved her people also. So women have always been there and doing great things.
We are waiting for modern day Deborah. We are waiting for modern day Queen Esther.
Oh, we have a lot of them now. I mean, you can't think, if you think about them, Fumilayos, Ransom Kuti, and then Margaret Echoes, and even Hajia Gambo Sawaba, and the role they played in advancing democracy or participation, right to vote for women in the north, like Hajia Gambo Sawaba. But even in present day, we have a lot of women who are advocating for several things. And I think for me, is we need to constantly remind ourselves of these stories, because most times you have arguments saying, oh, the holy books promote only male leadership. But now we're seeing that if you take out time to study these books, that there are stories of women who provided leadership at different levels in our religious history. And interestingly, when we're giving the story around the women, how all these men ran away and abandoned Jesus, I think my story is just telling us that most times women are more courageous than men, and that our men in our leadership don't run away from the responsibility of delivering good governance, which is why we need more women, because the women will stand the course. When the man runs away, the man will still stand and say, this country will fix it and will fix it. That's the moral I took from this your story, Father.
Yes.
Now most times the men may run away when it gets tough, but the woman, and we always say, actually I always say this thing, that a father may disown a son or a child, but you see a mother, no matter how bad, they say monkey no fine but mama like him. No matter how bad the child is, the mother will still have hope. And we keep saying, there is hope. We can change this. It will, either if they are religious, they'll keep praying, they'll keep welcoming the child, because they believe that their love can change that person. I think this is one of the things we need to understand, that the idea we are pushing is a society where there's equal partnership of men and women in leadership, because we all bring different we bring a variety of experience, a variety of capacities and competencies, and our unique individuality, those things that make us different, are the things we need to build a society that works for all. It's been an interesting conversation, and this is where we will come to the end of this conversation. This season of the podcast is actually supported by the African Union GIZ Aware Project to promote women political leadership within the continent. And I'll hand it over to Quincy Y to say hello to our audience.
Thank you for listening to us. Thank you to our guests for coming here, and we are pleased to have you with us. And our behind the scene crew members, DJ Drexx, Hamilton Odems, Fredcoker, Ifeanyi, Ayomide, Andrea. Thank you for all you do behind the scene. We appreciate it.
Yeah, and to our audience, don't forget to subscribe drop a comment, let us know what you think about this topic, and what would you do to support a woman or a girl in your society today. Follow us on all our social media platforms at the Unamplified Podcast. We are on Spotify. You can listen to us there. We are on X or Twitter. We are on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at the Unamplified Podcast. You make these an amazing conversation always, and we look forward to reading your comments. Usually we end with a cheers to Africa. Sadly, Shik is not here. When you're on,
you're amplified.
Cheers to Africa.